Treasury is international, and as part of international organizations, treasurers need to operate worldwide. However, each geographical region has its own unique challenges to this, and this could be wider economic or political construct or wider financial landscape or the level of development of the corporate treasury profession. So today we'll be deep diving into East Africa and unpack these three areas. One, to focus on the role of the corporate treasury profession. Two, some of the specific challenges the corporate treasurers face. Three, what needs to be done so that corporate treasurers can influence more the strategic direction of the organizations. I am John Tumwine, an ACT member, as well as an ACT ambassador in East Africa. I work for Stanbic Bank in Treasury and Capital Management. I'll be moderating this panel. We have panelists from different sectors to get a good blend of experience and views. I will now invite the panelists to introduce themselves. Hilary?
Thank you very much, John. As you have noted, Hilary Oonge is my name. About the last decade, I have been working in the treasury function as a corporate treasurer in various industries. I have been in banking, I have been in insurance and financial services, so to speak. I have done a stint in oil and gas, and currently doing an interesting assignment with MCOPA, which is a blend of a financing as well as energy, renewable energy solution entity. And something that, you know, with all that diversity of exposure and experiences as a corporate treasurer, I want to hope that I will be of benefit through this conversation as we interact. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sydney.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Ochuli. I am I'm an ACT member and ambassador here in Kenya. I've also been a treasurer for the past 8 of my 10 working years, basically majoring in a telecommunications firm, global telecommunications firm, and currently right now I'm handling treasury in a listed exchange here in Nairobi. I look forward to interacting with you in this session.
Thank you, Sydney. And you know, I recall I was a treasury dealer in a commercial bank for some time. I changed jobs and took on the challenge of setting up a corporate treasury unit in a pension fund. You know, and while I got there in setting this up, you know, coming up with policies and procedures, spreadsheets to measure, report, and manage market risk and liquidity risks. And as we talk of liquidity risks, then the experience I had was limited to tactical and contingent liquidity, not so much on structural liquidity, funding, and investment. So it became very clear to me quite quickly when I took on to the responsibility that my skills needed an intervention urgently. There was a big skills gap. And I tried to search around, and ACT caught my attention. I enrolled. It was a bit pricey, I can say. But as I kept, you know, trying to explore in there, I noticed there was an opportunity for a bursary. I applied for it, and luckily for me, I was awarded the bursary. And you know, the rest, as we can say, is history. So but specifically, it sorted out the skills gap I had and more. I could then engage at operational, tactical level, and at a strategic level. So I found that quite, you know, quite useful in terms of my journey in brief. But that's on the side. If I may turn to you, Hilary, what has been your experience as a corporate treasurer in East Africa? And where would you say corporate treasury in East Africa is at? And what could make it even better?
Thank you, John. That's a very loaded question. Huh? To critically think about it, as it's most of the treasurers in this particular region, you will actually identify that you more or less found yourself in treasury by accident. Now, if I was to specifically speak of my experience, Why do I say that? When you go to an undergraduate school, I trained as an accountant, I certified as an accountant, and I knew I was going to practice accounting. But then when you get into the actual corporate scene, you actually start realizing that the things you practiced, you studied in school, are not the only things that happen in the corporate. So fortunately for me, I got into an entity that was quite actively progressive, so to speak, with interactions in the region and more or less within the African entity that sort of had an exposure to these elements of corporate treasury. I must say this, I must underscore and emphasize this. I got into corporate treasury by accident. And if I could just give the reason why I say that is because when it was ripe for me to be promoted into an accountant role, I had not qualified as an accountant because I was still doing my certification. But because my employer could not get a better person to do that particular role more than I could have possibly done, they decided to promote me but give me a different title. And guess what title they gave me? A treasury accountant. And up to now, I look back at it and ask myself, was it a question of, demeaning the treasury accountant role, or is it a question of not really knowing what the treasury role really meant for that particular organization? Be it as it may, I still continued practicing as an accountant, albeit with a heavy load of treasury responsibilities. Now, looking back at it, again, I realized that the very fact that I'd worked in a bank always gave me an advantage because I could speak the banking language and I could be identified as one of them. And so I had always an advantage within my peers to sort of then be able to participate in conversations that were what you say are much more treasury-oriented conversations. And so, as you could imagine, progressively, I kept myself, as you did ask yourself, John, that how then do I ensure, how then do I, get to have the skill set that is required for a corporate treasurer? And if I look back to that particular experience, I actually then realized that if I did not deliberately decide to invest in myself in terms of growing my skill set, then I possibly could have deviated and settled as any accountant. Because let's be honest, the corporate treasury function for the longest has not been appreciated for what it should and what it is. You will find accountants practicing as treasury professionals, treasury people, but how they do is manage working capital and end their conversation there. But you actually realize that for organizations, especially multinationals in our space that have appreciated the profession for what it is, the always then are able to actually have a consistent, continuous advantage over the companies that do not appreciate that role for what it is. So that's why I found myself that what could I actually be able to do to, expound on my skill set because I'd been thrown into a role awaiting my qualification as an accountant. Maybe they could have actually changed my role. Thank God they did not change even after I qualified, because I deliberately decided that at that point I'd appreciated the role for what it essentially is supposed to be. So what did I do? I made a deliberate effort of, being a frequent visitor of ACT website. And there is a lot of material in the ACT learning, available resources. I did a deliberate attempt to, being an active follower of TMI. I don't know, many of us who have also followed that particular site. For me, it was deliberate. Every single day, I had to, follow through a resource that was very aligned to Treasury. And that significantly built my skill set. I also had a deliberate effort in terms of, I was accepted by the banking professionals because I always aligned to them as one of them. And so having conversations to do with banking and banking relationships and things to do with the banking context, they were much more aligned to be. So following on that, then being able to move into organizations that were practicing and living global corporate treasury and having mentors and people that you could actually look up to from that treasury perspective also was significantly very instrumental for me if I look back at it. So coming back to the element of what then is the context of this treasury in East Africa, I strongly feel, Sydney, that much as we have tried to, start aligning ourselves to ACT and what is the influence of ACT, so to speak, I could give a context of my interaction, back in the day, for those that were in the, leading the ACT at that point in time, but may not have time. But what I really feel strongly is the fact that the acceptance that has started, the alignment, the ambassadors that we have within the region now, and the work that Sydney and John and the rest of the other teams are essentially doing to ensure that that appreciation is there within the region is actually, starting to influence the conversations that we require to have, which is a question of, how do we mainstream the corporate treasury spirit and the corporate treasury mandate and the corporate treasury thinking, as opposed to the traditional accountant role, so to speak. And this does not only start from the, the boardroom, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot that we essentially require to do in alignment with the other trainings that are happening in universities, in professional trainings, and etc. ACT is the only known brand, at least within our region, that is training treasurers. But there are many other brands that are supposed to be doing that, can actually be able to complement what ACT is doing in terms of cementing and really the footprint of the profession, so to speak. So I strongly feel that we have done a walkthrough, but there is a lot more job that we can actually be able to do. And I strongly feel that for me, for those that have already done what we have done, I think there was a lot of proactive elements cemented on it. But I think it's now gotten to a point that, you learn the hard way. How do you make the others who are coming up to have the easy way through the journey, so to speak? And I believe that's where we are, and that's why such conversations are very passionate conversations for me.
Thank you so much, Hilary. Indeed, quite a colorful sort of experience, and cutting across Sydney. I'm looking to hear from you. What has been your experience as a corporate treasurer in East Africa, and where do you say corporate treasury is at in East Africa, and what could make it even better?
Thanks, John, for that. I believe most of my sentiments will really mirror to what Hilary has just said. So for me, also getting into corporate treasury was sort of by accident. I think in my first role in Encounter Treasury, it was in a global telecommunications firm. The good thing, they had a dedicated treasury team. So I came in as an assistant. In fact, if I can remember my title correctly, it was more of working capital assistant, something of the sort. So the telecoms company definitely was involved in a lot of funding arrangement, investment, negotiation. We're doing a lot of FX because it was it was based, it had footprint all over Africa. So that was a role that I thought, wow, this is actually exciting. We're doing cash forecasting. At that time, it was a rolling 12-month forecast using spreadsheets. So I really had an appreciation for the numbers. So it was something that really intrigued me at the time. I wasn't really trained to be an accountant per se or in treasury, but when I joined that particular role at first, I thought, wow, this is actually something interesting. It is not your usual accountancy role, because most people would know accounting as, if you ask someone to give you a summary of accounting, it's probably debit and credits, and that's just the end. But this was something more. You could see you are making decisions that are actually affecting the company. You are deciding, okay, fine, this is what we project our cash to be at the end of 2 months. We need to do something. We need to either utilize our overdraft. We need to either call for more funds from another company, upstream funds. So it was something that really piqued my interest, and I started to wonder, is there a place where I can learn more about this? Because ultimately, as Hilary has mentioned, there's really no recognized corporate treasury in ideally in Kenya, it's something that has been picking up slowly. Most companies have not been embracing it. They have probably been, as Hilary said, that is a role that is assigned to, let's say, someone as a financial accountant. But you see, a financial accountant wouldn't really know, let's say, the health of the company in terms of cash flow. They're probably more interested in making sure entries are recorded correctly, making sure payments are released on time, but overall the health of the company in terms of cash flow, no one will probably bother about that. So I had to make sure, I had to dig deeper to understand what this is that I'm actually into. Fortunately, at the time, I was interacting with someone who was privy to the ACT. So he asked, okay, I can see you're actually loving what you're doing. Would you like to know more? I said, yeah, I would love to know more. So they actually told me, okay, go to this website, treasurers.org. It will basically build your knowledge on that. And that's exactly what I did. So going into there, I got to see all the courses that the ACT was offering at the time, which got me thinking, this is actually something that I can do. And then that's how I started my interactions with the ACT. So that was about 8 years ago. 8 years ago till then, I think my knowledge has actually grown as regards to corporate treasury. I have actually been able to find an appreciation for the role that treasury actually has in a company. And as Hilary said, it's something that's now growing. I can see there are more and more companies actually seeing the role of what a treasurer, or rather the value addition of what a treasurer does to a company. And currently, I think over the past 2-3 years, we have been seeing a lot of influx on advertisements of companies looking for either treasurers, a treasury manager, a treasury analyst, things like that, because slowly but surely companies are coming to see the importance of having a treasurer in the organization. Currently where I am, it's actually a very good example of that. I joined my current company as a treasurer because they didn't have one. So when I came here, I had to build everything from scratch. That was actually it was very eye-opening. It was such a good experience, to be honest. When you build something from scratch, you generate your own policies, you generate your own investment policies, funding policies, a treasury policy, you start to maintain your own bank relationships, do your own risk management. I could not do that if I did not have prior knowledge by basically, digging deep and trying to see, okay, this is what is the global industry practice, and this is how you're supposed to apply it where you are in your particular company. So I would say having that knowledge actually helps, considering that I actually had to do something from scratch. Number two, as Hilary has said, I think in this pandemic, we're actually seeing more and more reliance on the importance of a treasurer. Many companies, all companies ideally, were caught flat-footed by this pandemic. So what did that happen? Everyone had to go back and start to see, okay, what is our biggest asset right now? Basically cash. How do we manage our cash in times like this? If you're in fast-moving consumer goods, definitely your cash flow is your number one headache. If you're in transport, it's still your number one headache. If you're in securities exchange, trading is your number one headache, which will lead to where do you get the cash from? How do you move cash from point A to point B? How do you invest your funds? How do you handle the risk that is now, that the current pandemic has given us? How do you deal with your debtors? This is all part of cash flow management. Now, if someone did not have the precise knowledge on how to navigate that, then that would be a problem. So this pandemic has actually kind of like shone a spotlight on the importance of a treasurer in a company. You need someone who basically keeps his finger on the pulse of the company. The pulse of the company is cash. So someone needs to know, how is our cash doing on a day-to-day basis? How is it moving? Is the company healthy cash-wise? Is it not? And if not, what do we do next? So I would say currently in East Africa, it's been a changing landscape, to be honest. As Hilary has said, I think when you all joined, Treasury was very nascent, to be honest. As Hilary said, not many companies were experimenting with that idea. But as time grows by, people start seeing the appreciation of Treasury. If a company has surplus funds, they'll need someone to manage its investment. Who do they turn to? A treasurer will be required for that. If a company needs someone who is good with, working capital management, they'll need someone who is actually conversant with that. That is only a treasurer. If you need someone to help you with your forex needs as a corporate, if you need someone who needs to, your risk management also as a corporate in terms of your cash flow, a treasurer is basically your sole go-to guy who can actually manage that. So currently, yes, when we started out, I would say it was a nascent industry, but as time goes by, I think people are seeing the importance of it, especially in corporates, not just banks.
Sydney, thank you so much. Hilary, if I may come to you, what do you think needs to be done to enable treasurers, corporate treasurers, influence more at the strategic level in their different companies?
Thank you so much, John, for that good question as well. First, let me put that in context. With the advent of this aggressive technology, it is not lost on many of us who are observing the treasury function that many multinational, so to speak, and global companies have decided to centralize, as it were, the treasury function. And you actually notice that the days of treasury being responsible for bank reconciliations and so-called facilitating the cash sweeping, those days are long gone. And what that has meant is that you can easily have someone who's seated in +2 GMT and have him do all those things for the company. So what then does it mean for this person who was in East Africa supposed to be doing those responsibilities? You can be able to have a relationship with Lloyds Bank in the UK and ensure that they are able to bank you across the world, and you actually do not need to move out of UK to be able to do the things that you're supposed to do in Kenya, for instance. So what then is the role of Hilary seated in East Africa who's supposed to be working for that multinational? I think it's gotten to a point where realistically, the first question the treasurer of today must answer is, what value am I creating for the organization? And that question is more broadly and should be entrenched in our conversation now than ever before. Yeah, I mean, we have to be part and parcel of the value creation process of the business. And if you cannot answer the question, how has the business been making money? How is it making money today? And how will it be making money tomorrow? Then the whole aspect of you being responsible for taking care of the liquid assets of the company ceases to make sense. And that to me is where the conversation should be able to start from. How prepared are we to understand the value creation process of the business? And are we getting the necessary trainings? Are we getting the necessary tool set to be able to help us understand the value creation process of the business? Because once we understand that, then we are able to actually know what are the weak points within that value creation process. And so we can actually be able to tell people that if we do X, Y, Z, then we are actually able to make more for the shareholder, in which case then we actually continue being relevant. Otherwise, we are seeing scenarios where, strategic, CEOs are starting to create exec, tool sets and skill sets, in very nice fancy names, call them strategic finance, call them strategic, strategic support, call them executive forward-looking, all those fancy names, all in the name of trying to think through how do we, manage the working capital more effectively? How do we manage the liquidity more effectively? How do we raise fundraising for the future of the organization more effectively? what that means is they are basically starting to create another subset of the corporate treasury role. Why? Because the treasurer of today is not properly equipped to have strategic conversations with the executives. So what then is the solution I will propose in my view? Number one is, if I look through the entire training of the ACT courses, yeah, does it be able to help today's treasurer be able to sit in the exec conversations and discuss strategy? If you speak to out of 10 treasurers today, ask them when is the last time they actually did a training specifically to amplify their strategy conversations, you will actually realize that not many of us are essentially doing that. So are we pushing ourselves to oblivion? I think that's a question I'll put out there. But my view is, and I completely support, is let's be proactive in terms of knowing what is the direction. And one of those directions we need to actually know is what we have said is, understand strategy. How do you understand strategy? Invest in trainings. Does the curriculum of ACT support that? We should be able to possibly look at that and answer ourselves satisfactorily around that question. Are we attending the conferences, the annual conferences that are being arranged by ACT that are supposed to have those frequent peer-to-peer, challenging, challenges, so to speak, that are supposed to align us into more forward-looking conversations? How attuned are we into, the future of Treasury in terms of technology onboarding, in terms of the RPA conversations, in terms of the AI onboarding, and how we essentially ensure that we are so-called the technology partners of the finance of the CFO, as opposed to taking instructions from the CFO to adopt the technology that is possibly getting out there. I think we need to really be proactive in terms of those conversations and be so plugged in. Otherwise, we will be pushing ourselves to oblivion as the corporate treasurer.
Thank you so much, Hilary. You talk of that and remind me of, indeed, the wealth of resources that ACT has. Talk of the behavioral competencies, talk of offering coaching, offering mentorship opportunities. So I guess there is quite a lot. And indeed, to your point, a question put out there: how, as corporate treasurers, how proactive are we in accessing these resources and utilizing them to make sure that we are ready for the future? Sydney, if I may come
maybe John has a comment
yes,
to that, which I think is very interesting, is the fact that, part of the conversations I hear from corporate treasurers is the fact that, hey, the diploma of ACT is, for lack of a better word, not affordable to many of them. And you ask them, what is then the price of not investing in it? The price of investing in it is could be the result of what we are talking about, where we are not relevant to the organizations we are serving in the first place. So there has to be a mindset and a mentality shift in terms of how we are essentially seeing the investment in personal development and personal, push to be able to be of value to the organizations we are speaking, not only for today, but much more for the future.
The price of not knowing is not quantified, but if you were to quantify it, I'm sure it would be mind-boggling. Sydney, if I may come to you for your closing shots, your parting shots on this.
Yeah, I think Hilary has really raised some really valid points on personal development as a treasurer, and I think those one quote which I had at a past ACT conference that really stuck with me till this day. It was really applicable, especially during these pandemic times. And if I remember, the speaker said, if as a treasurer, this pandemic hasn't afforded you an opportunity to actually influence the strategic decision of your company, then I think you have failed as a treasurer. Because and I would totally repeat this, I think this pandemic has really shone a light on the importance of treasurers. As Hilary has mentioned, this is when you as a treasurer need to be involved in those discussions with your CFO, with the board, presumably, because things are no longer the same. companies have had to re-strategize how to make money afresh. They have had to re-strategize how to stay afloat. How do you stay afloat? You stay afloat by making sure your cash flow is okay. So if as a treasurer, you're not involved in those specific discussions, then I think you need to reevaluate yourself and see what do I need to do more in order to assert my my influence in these types of discussions, because these are actually the discussions that shape the direction of the company. As you have seen, I think all the companies that we are in right now, basically it's not business as usual over the past 18 months. Some things have had to change. We have had to re-strategize here and there based on the current scenario that is there worldwide. So that is when you as a treasurer would come in, basically based on the skills that you have learned, applied in your personal development. As we have seen, ACT resources are quite packed with a lot of things that you can apply, which will basically make you into a wholesome treasurer rather than just someone who is there crunching numbers. I would say we are on the right track, probably as a parting shot. Yes, in East Africa, we're on the right track. There seems to be piqued interest in what Treasury really is. I would say that in Kenya, you in Uganda, John, I think you would also attest to the same. There's been some kind of a spike in interest because people want to know, okay, yes, this is finance, but this is not really reporting numbers. This is more of looking into the future and saying, okay, this is the strategy that the company should take based on this and this and this. So basically, you become a value driver in your company rather than someone who's just sitting at the back end reporting numbers. You become someone who gets to drive the whole direction of the company by basically you get to see the overall, I think, picture of the company. So yes, I would say Treasury is picking up. I would, in the next 2-3 years, I would think more and more companies would have realized the importance of having a corporate treasurer if they don't already have one. They would have also realized the importance of having a properly trained corporate treasurer, not just someone who has been picked. Let's say you're doing accounting, then you come into the role by accident. We do not want to repeat what happened to myself and Hilary, coming into the role by accident and getting to, work on it on your own, but rather get someone who is qualified and see how your company will change. That is all I would say.
Thank you very much, Sydney. Hilary, in less than 20 minutes, your parting shots. 20 seconds, sorry. Yeah. You're on mute, Hilary.
Sorry about that. I will actually emphasize the fact that what ACT is doing through such conversations is priceless. We didn't have this opportunity years back. We now have it. That essentially tells you that we are headed to a right direction. Number two is a question that, the future of Treasury is determined by the people that are doing those roles today. John, if you and I and Sydney and anyone else do not demonstrate that this role is valuable within the organizations we are working through, then we make the future and those that are coming, from behind us, not have, a platform to demonstrate that this treasury is essentially worth it. People will believe the value of corporate treasury by the value we who are doing it today are actually being able to generate. That is the only way we can actually be able to attract and cement the gravita of this role going forward. And then finally, aligned to what I've just said, John, is the fact that I will emphasize the point that we need to be part and parcel of the business. Not only counting the bins, counting what has been received and managing what has been received, but also asking ourselves of how do we become part and parcel of expanding and growing the cake that is being built within the organizations we are in. And that's my challenge to all of us as my parting shot, John, that let us invest in ourselves and do that which the role expects of us, because in there lies the future of the corporate treasurer. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing all those ideas and building quite a rich context in which corporate treasury is working in East Africa and the journey ahead of us. Thank you so much.